This is the last RetroBlasting video we're going to make in this house.
I'm fine. I'm all right.
Let Ratchet check you out.
We're in the middle of a big move to a new house, but before we left this location that we've been at for 3 years, we wanted to get one more video in here. And I thought it would be appropriate to do a restoration of Optimus Prime, because he's a tractor trailer, and that's generally what you put your boxes in when you move to a new house. It's also my favorite Transformer, and my childhood G1 Optimus Prime took 3 rebuilds to get, fully repaired. This is my brother's, and my brother didn't play with his as much, but it has a little bit of damage, and of course, like many Optimus Primes, anyway, like many of them, he lost his fists, and he lost his accessories, and so what I want to do is put the base robot back together. His trailer is in good shape, but his cab has the common broken smokestacks and things like that. And since I've rebuilt my childhood Optimus Prime 3 times, I'm pretty familiar with this toy, so let's get started. If you grew up in the 80s or even in the early 90s, you're very familiar with the original Optimus Prime. This is a classic toy from our generation, and he's also very finicky as far as being able to repair him, take him apart, things like that. There's a whole assembly on him, the hips assembly, all the way up through the lower torso, that you cannot repair. It's friction pinned together. So fortunately, in this example, his legs are intact. We don't have to worry about that. What I'm worried about is this broken smokestack. The re-releases of Optimus Prime conformed to more stringent child safety standards where this stack is shortened, but the original Optimus Primes had the tall stacks because that's what the Diaclone Convoy looked like. So I need to get to this smokestack so that I can replace it with a vintage one that I purchased online. So the first thing I'm going to do to disassemble him is I'm going to lift his legs into robot position gently, because it's been 30 years and this vacuum-formed or vac metallized plastic has gotten brittle. Alright, so we've got him on his feet. Alright, I'm going to pop his arms out, which has always been a dicey prospect even back then. I always get real nervous around these Optimus arms. Alright. Ooh, alright, that's good. Okay, so the first step, we're going to pull his cab front down, and you see 2 screws here. These are where the Diaclone figures would have sat in the original toy in Japan. We're going to take these 2 screws out. For the purposes of doing Transformers disassembly, especially Optimus, I would recommend a dedicated small screwdriver. The interchangeables have a hard time getting into some of the nooks and crannies of G1 robots. Alright, as you can see now that those 2 screws are out, I can lift the arm assembly completely up off the lower body. And for the purposes of this repair, we no longer need the lower body, so I'm just going to set it off to the side where it won't get knocked over. This is where we're going to focus our efforts for the rest of this repair. You see that there is a screw on the side by the right arm. We're going to be removing that screw. And this level of repair isn't completely necessary for the purposes of the arm, but I just want to show you how you take this apart. There is an identical screw by the left arm. We're going to take that out as well. Alright, there is another screw. I don't know if you can see this. There's another screw underneath the assembly at the back. You have to turn his arm out of the way, and you want to be careful of this smokestack because we don't want to break the good one. Alright, now this screw is smaller than the others, so when you set it aside, keep in mind that screw is going to go back in first. Now we should be able to separate this assembly. Be real gentle. There we go. That's one side out. Heads out. The other side is out. You want to be real gentle because there are these pins on the side of the seats in the cab, and you want to keep those pins intact. This plastic has become very brittle over the last 30 years. Alright, this is the good arm. There's no need to take this arm apart, so we're just going to set this one off to the side. Here's our bad arm with the broken smokestack. There are 2 screws at the back of his arms, so we're going to take those out. Try and keep your screws separated based on where they came from. Come on, there we go. Alright, this is where things get a little frustrating. So now the arm is split between the front of the upper arm and the back of the upper arm, which then forms the back of the cab. These are 2 halves, and you're going to split them apart at the seam line. There we go. You see it's starting to split. Alright, now I've lifted the back off so I can show you the inner workings of the... Oh, see? It's okay, nothing's broken, but it means I'm going to have to show you this rebuilding it. You have a number of components that go into this arm. I don't know if you can see this, but this is it's a ratchet shoulder joint, and it has a corresponding ratcheted mate that lives inside the arm itself. We're going to have to put those back in correctly, otherwise his arm won't work when we reassemble. There is also in the side of the arm, the front of the arm with the smokestack, there is a tiny metal sheet. It's a metal plate, and it is removable, and you need to remember that the wide side of the plate of this panel faces downward toward the elbow. Alright. Here is our donor vintage smokestack. As you can see, it exhibits the same loss of vac metallizing as many of the toys have over the last few years. But this toy's already played with, and its other smokestack has lost some chrome, so it'll be a good match for it. I'm not too worried about it. It just comes out. It's held in by a kind of inset pin that's molded onto it, and we'll just replace it with the new stack, which should make our Optimus as good as new. Now, first thing I'm going to do is test fit the back onto it to make sure that it works with, and it looks like it's going to be flush, because sometimes what happens is the vac metallization is a little thicker on one smokestack versus another, and so when you try and mate these two back together, there's a gap, and you don't want to force the screws, so you just want to, like I said, you just want to dry fit everything first before you start putting all the parts back in, just to see if it's all going to work out. But that looks good. Alright, so now what we need to do, and you'll notice this this red pin has fallen out. This red pin goes through this cog piece, this gear for the ratchet joint. I'm just going to tentatively put it back in place because it helps the placement of that gear. Alright, so now the way this is going to work, and this is where it gets finicky, you have your shoulder joint and you have your back piece. The shoulder joint sits right here. The gear or the ratchet, there's an inset at the top, and the ratchet sits in that inset just inside like this. And then the gear, I don't know if this is easy to see, the gear sits in the opposing side, and that pin helps put that gear in place. It has its own inset by the smokestack at the other edge. Then you have your actual lower arm, and your lower arm sits in the bottom like this. Once you have all that in place, which can be very finicky, and I'm holding it together with all my fingers, you then have to put the back piece back on without all this going out of whack. Alright, so that'll be the front of the arm, back of the arm. Alright, it looks like we're good. Holding it in place. First thing we're going to do is put those 2 screws back into the back part of the arm. Don't over tighten these, just until they're snug. There's no reason to over tighten these screws. There we go. Alright, now I'm just going to look this over, make sure that it's correct. I'm starting to think that it's not. No, it's on correctly. See, this can get very confusing because of the geometry. You just want to check and recheck before you get too far into the repair. So this looks okay. So I'm going to continue. I'm going to put the second screw into the back of the arm. Alright, now I get to put the whole upper torso assembly back together. I'm going to lock these arms outward like this, as if he was in robot mode, because we're putting him back together in robot mode. So I've twisted these. So now these sort of extensions are facing forward with the screw holes. And you want to make sure when you do this that you put the Optimus head assembly in at generally the same time. So the Optimus head assembly, it has 2 pins, and those pins go on this kind of extension at the top. It sits in here like this, and then the cab piece with the back part towards the back, this little raised area, this little notched raised area towards the back, it slots in with that pin I talked about before into this hole. Alright, let's get that in one side. Alright, so that's press fit. Optimus's head. And on the other side, we're just going to sandwich it together gently. When in doubt, just back off and be as delicate as you can. Forcing anything on a transformer repair is not going to make your day better. It's going to make it worse. Alright, now that we have that done, remember that small screw that we took out of the back? I'm going to rotate his arm to get it out of the way. And then that small screw goes in the back side first. See how we have this dedicated screwdriver that helps us navigate this? That combo screwdriver wouldn't be able to do this. It needs smaller surface area to get into some of these nooks. Alright. Now we'll put the screws in either side of the assembly. Remember not to over tighten, just until snug, and then stop. This is not a car. A real car, you do not need to torque. Also, don't cross thread your screws. If it feels like it's going in at an angle, back out, reset the screw, and start over again. Because once you strip this plastic, you're done and you have to go find more parts. Alright, there's the upper torso assembly. Remember our guy here? The legs. So you have the two holes that are going to mate up with the two holes in the seating area. So you just kind of set them down on top of one another. Get Optimus's head out of the way. And you got two screw holes and you've got two screws. Also, when you're doing this final part, don't use the legs as a pressure point. Like, don't have the toy like this and put pressure on it while you're doing the screws like this. It'll just put pressure on the hip area, and you don't want that. So I'd pick the toy up like this with my thumb underneath the front bumper and put pressure on it that way. That looks pretty good. Now for the fun stuff. I sourced new hands and a rifle for my brother's Optimus Prime, which he's been missing for 32 years. Well, maybe a little less than that. I don't know how long we had him before we lost him. There's one, two. As far as his trailer, my brother's trailer was in really good shape. And I think the only parts his trailer is missing are parts that I don't plan to go looking for. As you can see, we've got Roller, we've got the two missiles, we've got Roller's one half of his gas pump. The only parts missing for this now are the actual nozzle of the gas pump and the hose. And I'm going to let my brother find those in the future if he ever wants them. But as far as the base robot and what makes this thing, you know, totally cool and playable and why we loved Optimus Prime as kids, it's back together. He's ready to transform and roll out. Now that Optimus is repaired, he can be packed up with the other Transformers to get ready for the move to the new house. We're really looking forward to showing you the new studio space that we're going to be working in. It's going to make, you know, our lives a lot easier as far as making RetroBlasting videos. More restorations, more features. It's going to be fun. We're looking forward to sharing it with you. So thanks for watching this, and we will see you on the next one.